I can never really tell if these are bad faith questions or actually this person wants to understand. Generally speaking, I find it to be a pretty stupid question. And I often wish that I could come up with a way to be more polite and not call it a stupid question. You know, that whole there's no such thing as a stupid question logic. But when people ask this question, I think to myself, what do you think that our first dates were like with these psychos? Like, do you think that we sit down at the dinner table and they start telling us about how they're abusive and controlling, and they ask us if we would like that and we agree to it, and then later we're like, oh, I've changed my mind? Or the alternative where they pretend to be kind and nice and actually lie. Have you heard of lying? It's a thing. Some people don't present themselves exactly as they are, and they actually wear what we call a mask. They're con artists, right? So they pretend to be nice and loving and wonderful. And then once the victim is in love with them, they shift. Now you might ask, well, at that shift, why do you not leave then? Not in all cases, but in many, many cases in an abusive relationship, there's something that's called a trauma bond. Now, this is a psychological phenomenon, so it's going to be hard for a lot of people who have not been through it to understand. But it's an emotional attachment that exists in a relationship where there's intermittent positive reinforcement and abuse and devaluation. Typically, when the abuse does start, it's very subtle, it's insidious, it's covert, it's a comment here and there. And it builds, it progresses to more and more abuse. But during these little instances of abuse, the abuser is rationalizing and justifying why it's your fault, why it's not even happening at all. They gaslight. And so victims can become trauma bonded to their abusers, and that makes them feel like they can't leave. But even if you're not trauma bonded, there's a million other reasons that a victim might stay in an abusive relationship. And there's a lot of people that are just sitting here thinking, oof, that could never be me. I know why you need to think that lie, and I know why you repeat that lie to yourself over and over. You want to think that it's an intelligence issue so that you think you're smarter and it would never happen to you. But I thought that too. Every single survivor of abuse thought that too at one point. We all thought that could never be me. And then it was. And the truth is, it could be you too. And people thinking that they're somehow immune to it is exactly why it continues to happen to people over and over. Because when you shame someone into thinking that they're stupid for staying or falling into it or believing the lies, they feel dumb and they feel a lowered sense of self-worth. And then they stay. And they don't talk about the abuse openly. But what do I always say about abuse, right? Abuse happens in silence. And these really awful, bad faith, shaming and blaming type of comments, they make victims want to remain silent. And so when you make comments like this, I want you to know that you are an enabler of abuse. You are supporting abusers, and you are creating a society and an environment where more people will continue to be abused. And you will continue to pretend that it could never happen to you. So why do people date abusers? Because abusers lie. That's the answer. Where do we find them? That's actually a really interesting second part to this. I suppose you think the answer is like under a rock, right? I found mine at work. For some reason, so many people think that the bad boys are the abusers. The abusers are those self-proclaimed nice guys. Abusers are everywhere. They're hiding in plain sight. Some of the nicest men that you'll ever meet beat their wives. And for the love of God, I am not saying that all nice men beat their wives. The fact that I even had to say that. You know that nice Christian man that you met at church? He screams at his wife. You know the guy that held the door for you the other day? He gaslights and cheats on his wife. Abusers are everywhere. I'm not saying that the majority of men are abusers. I'm just saying that the abusers are sprinkled everywhere.